This Fleet Equipment Unscripted interview is presented by Hendrickson, a leading manufacturer of heavy-duty suspension systems and components to the global commercial transportation industry. Visit hendrickson-intl.com to learn more.
Hi everyone, I'm Jason Morgan, Content Director for Fleet Equipment, and welcome to Fleet Equipment Unscripted. Today we're talking with Mike Branch, Vice President of Data and Analytics at Geotab, and Sajad Sharavi, Senior Product Manager, also at Geotab. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having us, Jason.
So we have another guest here that I also want to introduce, because last time we talked, we talked about Project G, which is beta technology of a large language model. So basically, it's that ChatGPT kind of functionality brought to vehicle data, and I can talk with it, and it can help me crunch my data. We talked about it here about a month ago, and as soon as I hung up that call, Mike, I was like, well, we should have talked to the AI. I can talk to this thing. So I appreciate you both here taking the time to walk me through Project G. Again, this is a beta, so it's like technology in progress, right? This isn't like a final version. This is still being developed. But Mike, why don't you take us through what we have here?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for clarifying that. It is a beta. We are working through this with a number of different customers. We've released it to a handful, and Sajad, after we've gone through a bit of the demo here, we'll kind of talk to you about some of the learnings and everything. But for us, it's very exciting because it represents a way for our customers to get quicker insight to their data via conversation, right? So what I've teed up for you today here is just a very kind of quick demo of some of the questions. And these are questions that have been driven from our customers as well, too. So we talked last time, right? As we're going through this beta project, we are also recording every single question that gets asked, right, so that we can have a better understanding of what our customers are actually looking to uncover. And that's been really, really helpful to date. So I'm going to start off with some pretty simple ones, go through to a little bit more complex ones. Okay. So very simply, you've got this chat interface, which you can see here in our My Geotab platform. Yeah. And if you're a customer of Geotab's data connector, then this module just kind of slots right in here. Right. And you can see at the top, the very first question that's being asked is simply, how much did my fleets idle last month, right? And so the AI produces that response, right? There's a little bit of technical jargon in there, right? So we're working to make it a little bit more conversational, but it tells you, what it did to figure that out, right? So to find out how much your fleet's idle, you can use the following query, and we've got a little kind of code snippet here. So this is important because if you happen to be a little bit technical and you want to understand what's going on under the covers, how it computed an average or a minimum or a maximum or whatever, you can click on this little tab here and it'll kind of show a query that was executed. Again, not for everybody, but if you want to dive a bit deeper, it gives you that potential. And then of course here, total idle duration in hours. You can give it a thumbs up and thumbs down as well too. So was that actually what you'd expected? Was it not? And that helps our data science team over here refine the models and making sure that we can, better answer these questions that are coming up. So that was a pretty simple one to get started. Right. A little bit more complex. This one down here, show me the outliers for idling over the last month. So this would be something that would actually be somewhat complex to do, right? If you're a data scientist or an analyst, you'd have to take out all this data, do this computation. So there's a number of different ways that you can look at outlier detection. What it's done is it's assumed a certain methodology, right? And then it's computed. So let me look at the outliers both on the side that is too high and the side that is too low. And I'm going to show you all of those vehicles. I'm going to pull them out for you to get. So that's what it's done here. And this is taken from our internal testing database. So if you see some weird, funky names and values in here, this is taken from our internal testing database. So again here, that little kind of code clipping here, click on, it shows you all the stuff that it had to do, right? So it wrote all that for you and then produced that result there, which is pretty neat. Few other questions here. Oh, do you have any questions there, Jason?
No, I was just, the outliers was interesting, I think, because that would, my thought would be to ask it, like which vehicles are idling the most or something, a little, that conversation. I mean, is is it more proper to use the outliers to get the data I need? You know what I mean? Like word choice becomes really specific at this point to try to get to the data and talk with it to get what you want.
It does, and so you could ask it. Some people have asked it, who's idling the most, right? In which
Right.
case, what it does is it ranks it typically, right, from like
Oh, okay.
top to bottom, and sometimes that might be okay, but you may want to do something a little bit more complex. And well, how do you know where to kind of cut off if you're just ranking it top to bottom? If you wanted to
Sure.
do an actual outlier analysis, this might be one of the examples. But to your point, you could have just as easily asked it, you know show me my top 10 idlers in the fleet, right?
Right, right.
So
Interesting.
it ranges, right? But you do have to be very specific with the questioning.
Right.
Another simple one, average age of vehicles in the fleet, right? So it goes in and it understands very carefully, of course, the make, the model of the vehicles, the year of all the vehicles. It has all that VIN level information in there, so it's able to compute that pretty easily. Some of our customers are interested in knowing, if the Go devices has been tampered with or if it's been removed, right? So you want to make sure that at all times you've got connectivity to all of your vehicles, and so that's a common question that actually gets asked by our customers. Hey, I want to know if something's been disconnected, if I'm communicating across the board, because sometimes you do get people pulling the device, right? And so here it's able to kind of answer that question pretty easily. um, which vehicles, we talked about which vehicles idled the most.
Yep.
Here's another question, which vehicles drove the most in descending order, right? So you can
Yeah.
see the total GPS distance in miles. Again, this was over the course of 2023. You could ask it to look at the last month or the last week. We have this concept in my Geotab of groups as well too. So if you want to
Yeah.
ask it for a specific group of vehicles, like for the Toronto location or the Dallas location, you can quite easily taper it to do that as well.
Right, right. Can you match it up then? I mean, I have my vehicles that idled the most, and then I get vehicles that drove the most. To me, there should be a correlation there. You know what I mean? Or at least I would be. That's where I would just start playing with it. You know what I mean? Trying to get it to ask,
Yeah,
okay, well, which vehicles drove the most and which one with the most idle time, that kind of thing.
that's exactly it. So you could ask it to, in this case, hypothetically, compute a score with that shows you a combined score of those who have idled the most and drove the most in the last month, and it would compute that, showing you both values pretty easily there.
Yeah, interesting.
Ultimately, and we look at this quite a bit. It depends on what the customer is trying to do, right? This has to be an easier way for them to get at the data than they normally would have.
Right,
So that's what we're trying to do as much as possible with the system.
right, right,
Um, Here's another great one, right? Because as we're looking at EVs, transition to EVs,
right,
understanding hybrid, understanding fuel economy, really
right,
important. So, what are the top 10 hybrids by make and model for fuel economy in my fleet? Right.
right,
So it looks across the fleet, looks at the fuel economy, looks at the VIN again, understands that we're dealing with hybrids, and plots out what the fuel economy is. You can see there, that certainly the Volt seems to have a much higher than normal fuel economy. It may be in this case that people are leveraging it on EV mode more
right,
so than the combustion engine. So there could be a number of reasons for that, but at least it starts highlighting some of these properties in your data, right? Very
right.
quickly, right? You can get that answer relatively quickly. Usually we're on average, I think we're looking at about 20-25 seconds per response. You can see this one was about 30 seconds.
Okay.
But for you to compute that and do all of this kind of data wrangling would take a considerable amount of time if you're pulling it from disparate sources.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Okay, well, let me. Can I ask it a question? Can I give it?
Yeah,
Can I
sure.
give it a try? Okay,
Go
all
for it,
right, all
Jason.
right, good. Well, I mean, okay, so that's it. I like the hybrid one because we do, and we've talked before about electrification, and I think there's still a lot to learn there in terms of if I have an EV fleet, right, and I can determine some things with that. That seems really interesting. But even going back to just running my day-to-day fleet now, I just like which vehicles are the most productive? Could I ask it that?
Yeah.
Is
So
that
so if you were to ask it which vehicles are most productive, here's the answer you get for our sample fleet. So what it did here
Oh yeah, okay.
is it assumed productivity was actually the most distance driven, right? And
Oh,
that could
okay.
be right or wrong, but it's one metric, right? That it took. So this is where you have to be very careful with
Yeah.
your wording. Otherwise, it's going to assume something like it did in this case, right?
Yeah, yeah, because I would want to go to maybe miles driven at best fuel economy with least idling. You know what I mean? It'd be like, okay, okay, I get, and this is the kind of the fun part with it too is you ask it something because you have an assumption of what that means, and then it gives you an answer, and you go, oh, okay, 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 I see how it thought about it, but now I need
Yeah.
it to do this. I need it to. I liked your combined score example earlier as well of putting these two functions together and it's spitting out a score. That's interesting.
Yes, and so to refine something like this, the interesting and not so interesting thing sometimes, especially from a product management perspective, is you can ask it the exact same question twice and sometimes get a bit of a different answer, right? Which is something that's very tricky to do with LLMs as
Yeah.
we're training. So I'm going to show you an example of that, building on what you just asked here. So you asked it, what are the most productive vehicles in my fleet?
Yeah.
I'm going to say now, assume productivity is the most stops in the least amount of time. What are the
Okay.
most productive vehicles in my?
Yeah. There you go.
And so what it does here is it computes a metric which is stops per hour for each vehicle and then ranks them. So that's one way of looking at it. You again this exact same question, you could ask, and it looks like what it does is compute what it's coined a productivity score, right? So it's kind of neat. It's come up with this notion of a productivity score and has looked at the metric a bit differently,
Right.
looking at dividing the total number of stops by the total driving time in hours. So a bit different from the take above. Neither is right nor wrong, but it's on your interpretation, right? So that's why it's so important for this to for the AI to explain back to you as much as possible what it is doing. And then that added benefit for us is that we've got the little code snippet in here that you can check as well too, if you want to dive deep. So
Right.
explainability so crucial, I think, in everything that we're doing. And we're trying our best to make that available in human language so that you can understand what the AI is doing. Otherwise, you're going to make the wrong assumptions and interpretations.
Yeah, and I mean that's an interesting case too. I mean, it's like showing your work, right? You're showing how it got there, putting the productivity and what assumptions it's making. Because yeah, I come back to I'm making assumptions, asking the question. It's making its own assumptions to some degree or its own methodology. Because I don't know. I mean, it's artificial intelligence. I don't know if it has assumptions or that would be a different conversation about awareness and assumptions and those kind of things. But showing the methodology and being able to interact with it. Sajad, I wonder as you're rolling this out and testing it to some degree in this beta environment with customers, what kind of experiences have you had along with them? How are they using it, and then what are you learning as you go through this?
For sure. This is one of the beauty of having a beta product, right? You can learn fast and work with the customers and see the type of questions that they ask and the feedback. So the feedback so far has been overwhelmingly positive. People love the fact that they can get to an answer in such a short amount of time. Yeah, overall, just the ease of using it. Has a little bit of learning curve, but it isn't that much. So as we saw, just learning that, oh, you need to specify what duration you're looking at when you're asking about idling when, right? So
Right.
there's a bit of a learning curve there, and customers can go through that as they're sort of experimenting with it. And then the other piece has been really democratizing data access, right? So lots of the organizations, um, they want all the people in their organization to have access to a tool like this and be able to ask their questions. So that's been the feedback so far.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even the question that the fleet manager might ask might be different than the question the service manager asks. Will be different than that even dispatch would ask, right? And still having all that information. Do you when you have customers that have different let's say, comfort levels with the data already, right? We got dashboards. It tells us lots of great stuff already. In terms of learning curve, is there anything that customers can do in either the way they think about data or translate some of the things that they already go and look for in the dashboard to ask it to ask Project G or converse with it? Even Mike going through it a little bit here with you and me, the way you think about it is just a little different than the way I would say it. Is there any advice for how you can refine those kind of things?
I think this goes back to a little bit about on our side, on the confirmation piece, right? So what did the model understand, as Mike mentioned? What was the response, and how did the model interpret that? And then once that information is presented to you, oh, okay, so this is what you understood of it. So let me refine my query there a little bit.
And then I think to go to your question, Jason, as well, it understands very much the context of the data connector right now. So if you built dashboards off of our data connector, you will understand what that schema looks like, how the aggregation is done. You'll understand because you've been building them in Tableau or Power BI and this kind of thing. So you'll understand that schema, which is really, really helpful when you're asking it the questions, right? Because if you don't understand the schema and the context with what it understands, you'll be asking maybe not necessarily the wrong question, but you'll be making assumptions of what data corpus it understands and has been trained on, right? And so that will be the tricky part, right? Because ultimately, we need to get to a point where you could just ask it any question and it would reply, right? And it's not quite there yet, but as we start adding more and more data sets into this to broaden its level of understanding, it will get smarter, it will get more intelligent, quote unquote, as we go. But at this point in time, if you have generated dashboards and charts off of our data connector, it's that same kind of level of data that you can expect to be informing this.
Okay. Two quick follow-ups for you, because you mentioned the training aspect, training the model, right? And when we talk about this, that's the Project G, the artificial intelligence, the large language model, is learning along with us. It's learning from questions and interacting. What goes into that training, and how does it grow?
So a couple of different ways, right? So it's by expanding the data set, the corpus that it has access to.
Okay.
And then this is where the questions from our customers really come to play, because now what we can do is we can look at the questions coming in from customers, understanding what they're after and understanding how one might articulate an answer to that in code, right? And so the more we understand what our customers are looking for in many different ways and shapes and forms, the better that we can do at fine tuning that large language model to be more representative of what the customer would be looking at. So it is a very iterative process, which is why monitoring and tracking and understanding, how good these answers are, even by these simple thumbs up, thumbs down, gives us a good sense of, how well the model is doing at answering the user's questions.
I see. Yeah. No, good point. The feedback loop is definitely necessary, especially in this step. Very interesting. So, just out of curiosity, so then, do you talk to it to see how much it understood the question, or are you in the code mode and like programming it at that point, or do you also interact with it just on that like meta level of, did you understand this, and then see what it spits out, or you guys just jump into the code probably and tinker?
We're jumping more in the model building side of things right now, but I will say it's a very, very interesting time. There's a lot, even since last we spoke, Jason. Right? You see all the new open source models being released by all sorts of organizations. Meta, Google's done a heck of a lot. We just came from Google Next last week, and they've been really pushing where they're headed with Vertex AI and their capabilities. Microsoft, of course, is doing an incredible job. So there's so much that is changing very, very quickly right now, and I think everybody is adapting to figure out, okay, well, how can we best make use of this for our customers and to really drive a home positive impact that's going to have some real value, right, beyond just creating a brief for something that's some real value for our customers to help them transition into transportation decarbonization, help them save lives whilst on the road. And so these are some really high value things that we think this can really have impact on.
Yeah, well, and even from the demo here, it's already a huge leap in terms of how I interact with my data. I know, getting people actionable insights has been a Geotab mainstay pretty much forever since you guys have been doing this. So like getting to it even quicker and in a way that is just, even for me, it's more approachable in some ways, right? It's a conversation. And yeah, it might be a little more structured maybe than we're used to. Like even in here in this conversation, I've got to be a little more structured in the questions that I ask it versus you guys. So thanks for putting up with me.
Yeah.
But it's already such a huge step forward in that kind of interacting with the information in that way.
And like Sajad has mentioned as well, this is a beta program, right? It is learn by iteration with our customers. It's been, I think, quite a good success when it comes to that. We'll just help build the future, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Guys, thank you for taking the time. Thanks to Project G for showing up and also talking with us. That was fantastic. And I'm sure we'll all talk very soon as more of this develops. Thanks again.